So today I want to talk to you about two communication dilemmas. They happen all the time. In fact, the difference between the word dilemma and the word problem is problems can be solved. Dilemmas there is no solve for. We only can manage a dilemma. So I want to talk about a couple of real basic ones, and they are circle, square, triangle, or also what we call the dip. Let me first explain the dip to you. Imagine if you have a friend who sits down next to you in the break room or cafeteria, or whatever the case may be, and starts telling you about their problem. In other words, they just start emptying the bucket. They have a problem with their manager, their peer, something's going on in their life. We'll say business related for now. Something that they want to talk about. So they kind of start emptying the bucket. So what they do essentially is they start off and they're off to the races, telling you about their problem with their manager, their peer, whatever the case is. So you, as a good listener, you want to stay with them. You want to essentially fly parallel with them. So what you do is you start off as a good listener. You start kind of flying right next to them, at least in terms of listening. But something usually happens real quick in the listening process that causes you to stop listening. In other words, very quickly, early on, you stop listening. And I'll give you two reasons why we tend to stop listening. One, we've just simply lost interest. We don't care. We've got our own meetings and our own peers and our own managers and things to worry about. So we tend to kind of tune out. Or the other reason number two is we have got the problem solved. We know what it is already. So therefore, by having the problem solved, we're just simply waiting our turn to talk. You ever done that? Or, as I said earlier, we just lose interest. In both cases, we stop listening. In other words, the listening process really stops. And what we kind of start doing is we start deviating from the whole conversation. In other words, the internal kind of talk takes over. And we start thinking about the meeting that we have coming up later on, or we start thinking about the grocery list, or the ride home, or what we have to do this evening, or what's coming up this weekend, and all that other stuff. And we tend to go down to the valley here. Meantime, what's this person still doing? Person A, your friend, colleague, is still telling you what's going on. They're still emptying the bucket. And it's funny how we've kind of started to develop, as adults at least, we get good at bad listening habits. In other words, we learn how to mask them. We learn how to overcome them. And then when we kind of sense the person is wrapping up here a little bit, they're moving towards the end, we have a tendency, as bad listeners, to resurface and kind of end in parallel with them. And we say things like, well, let me know how that goes, or, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know, all right? So what appeared to be us being here while they were listening, we really were probably somewhere down here at the valley. And we say things, we nod our heads, we say a couple little key phrases, yeah, I'm with you, oh, yeah, good point. Those little kind of knee-jerk things that we don't really have to think much about, we just kind of say, all right? The problem with being down in the valley here is we've actually missed what they've really been saying. We've missed the feelings. We've missed some of the emotion that might be behind what they're saying. Some of the things that might be important for us, that would have been important for us to be present for, in terms of the listening process. Because I'm going to tell you a little fact about the way our brains work, or our minds work, is we cannot be down here and up here at the same time. We can only focus really consciously on one thought at a time, or in this case, from a listening standpoint, we can only be one place at a time. And you probably have been down here in the valley many times. In fact, it's human nature to be down in the valley. And if you think about it, think about different conversations that you have in your lifetime. There are times when probably you can get away with this, kind of being down in the valley. Kind of the cocktail conversations, or the little light party conversations that we have, sometimes with relatives, sometimes with friends, sometimes with work colleagues. We get away with it. And we repeat it again and again. We kind of repeat this dip process. But I guess there's also times, it's also safe to say that there are times when we want this line to be a solid line. We want to be present. We want to be listening. There are some conversations that are more critical. Conversations like when we're getting feedback, or maybe we're giving feedback to somebody, especially when we're building agreements with a peer or manager. when we're getting an assignment, when we're taking on a new task or a new role. There's new expectations maybe that are going to be bestowed upon us. All right, you get where I'm going, hopefully, and that is there's some more critical conversations where you want this to be solid, the line here. One of the ways to keep this line solid is reflective listening. Because if you notice, what reflective listening really is periodically I'm going to surface in this listening process and actively and verbally give back what I think I'm hearing the message. And I know that I've reflected correctly because the other person usually responds with a yes, exactly, or a head nod, or some type of positive, kind of something affirmative that we know that we received the message. And that's critical. I think it's critical in the listening process. Reflective listening is almost like, I like to think of it as, maybe a little corny analogy, but I think of it as kind of like a pop quiz we give ourselves in the listening process. And the pop quiz is every time I surface, I'm going to try to reflect what I think I heard. And by me passing the quiz, getting the affirmative response from the person, then that tells me that I passed the quiz. And then I listen more and I do it again. I do it when it's appropriate. And that's one of the things that keeps this line very solid. Because there's also another fact about the human brain that most of us maybe aren't aware of. And that is that our mind tends to wander very quickly. In fact, every 5 seconds, a new thought will enter into our head, therefore take us off track, therefore cause us to maybe dip a little bit. If we allow those thoughts to continue, we dip down in the valley. When we don't want to dip, or at least keep the dips to a minimum, reflective listening is a great way to actively keep us involved in the conversation by reflective listening. And that's one of the key dilemmas that we have to deal with, is this dip. Again, not a collection dilemma, but a communication dilemma. One that is never going to go away, but one that we clearly can solve or at least maybe mitigate by incorporating the skill of reflective listening.